2 days after our groundbreaking CNN Tea Party presidential debate in Tampa, Ron Paul still getting some heat about the answer he gave me to one of my questions. We have some new information to put the Republicans' views on health care into some context. For that, we asked Brian Todd to do some checking. Brian, what are you finding out?
Wolf, as you know, Ron Paul stuck to his position that night. He never wavered, but what he didn't do, he didn't bring up a very personal story, a story of a close aide that he lost 3 years ago, a story that takes this way beyond the hypothetical for Ron Paul.
It was one of the most pointed moments in the early debate season. Wolf Blitzer asked Republican presidential candidate Ron Paul, a staunch opponent of a government role in health care, what should happen to a 30-year-old man who can afford insurance, chooses not to buy it, then becomes catastrophically ill.
He needs intensive care for 6 months. Who pays?
That's what freedom is all about, taking your own risk. This whole idea that you have to prepare and take care of everybody.
Asked if society should let the man die, Paul said no, and said in his experience, churches, charities, friends, and relatives would help. It's a circumstance Ron Paul knows intimately. In June of 2008, Paul's former campaign chairman, Kent Snyder, who Paul says talked him into running for president that year, died of pneumonia. Snyder had no insurance. Colleagues and relatives say a pre-existing condition made it impossible for him to get coverage. I spoke with Paul about the experience.
Did you try to help him? Did you want to help him at the time with
Absolutely.
his bills?
He was a close friend of mine. He had worked with me for 12 years. We did everything we could because we knew he was having a struggle paying his bills, so we did what we could to raise as much money as possible on the internet.
Snyder's bills totaled more than $400,000, according to an aide for Paul. The aide says Paul's staff raised more than $50,000, but the rest of the bill was passed on to Snyder's estate. The aide says to his knowledge, the hospital has not yet tried to make a claim for that money. Analysts don't see this case hurting Ron Paul politically.
I think this story tells you who Ron Paul really is as opposed to the politicians who say one thing and do another. He's a guy who's pretty principled. He knows what he believes. He takes stands that sometimes can look really difficult to voters.
Does this make Paul and his followers seem heartless?
Some might be surprised that you don't take this more personally, given the experience that you had with Kent Snyder.
How could I take it any more personally? Because he was a friend and did what I could to help him. But it is something that, you know, was so unfortunate. So it was a tough time for all of us. I mean, our campaign really hadn't quite finished when he got deathly ill, and I had known him for so many years.
Ron Paul made very clear that Kent Snyder was cared for. Colleagues say he spent several weeks in the hospital. When I asked if he really believes that churches and charities could take on the financial burden for people like Snyder, Paul said not today because the government has run up the costs. Wolf.
You know, at least one Democratic group is now trying to use this for political gain.
That's right. It's a group called Protect Your Care. It's a Democratic-leaning group called Protect Your Care. It's launched a new ad called Let Him Die. It's a takeoff of your question to Ron Paul and the audience's answer. Now, we have to reiterate, Paul said no when you said that. As you remember, it was the audience who said yes. Very controversial there. And this new ad says something like, you know, would Mitt Romney let him die? So there's a lot of traction in that exchange with Ron Paul.
Not everyone in the audience. There were a few scattered,
right.
Comments that came out. But when I heard your report just now, the whole notion of this individual who worked for Ron Paul couldn't get health insurance because he had a pre-existing condition under the new law, the law that President Obama and the Democrats pushed. You could get health insurance if you have a pre-existing condition. Did you get into that with Ron Paul?
You know, we talked about that. He is not wavering from his position. The government should have no role in this. Churches, charities, friends, relatives have to take up the mantle here. You know, but he does admit these days $400,000. Churches, charities, and friends usually can't come up with that kind of money. You know, but he's not wavering. Is really the bottom line.
All right. Thanks very much, Brian, for that report.